let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaming, fetishism, and everything plus size. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. I am super excited about the roundtable discussion today. We've got a number of guests with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves one by one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Phil Berrigan. I am a writer and publisher, and happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Mason Arago, and Phil is my husband, and together we've done several books together, and I'm an illustrator, as you can see from behind me.
Hi everyone, I'm Fuad, also known as Fuadito in Instagram, and I'm a general practitioner, I'm a doctor, and just an all-round geek and all-round in real life as well.
And I'm mxjeangrey, yes really. I am amongst other things, former comics retailer and major comic fan for basically my entire life. So
we have truly the perfect cast of individuals today to talk about this. And if you're listening at home, are a comic fan, please make sure you comment and listen everywhere that you can. Let us know what your thoughts are on today's episode, because of course we are talking about all things fat in comics. So listen, everyone, let's just get straight into the business. How did each of y'all get into comics?
For me, I think it's kind of like chicken and the egg because I'm not entirely certain. I think it started with watching reruns of Spider-Man and Friends on Saturday morning, like in the early 80s. And there were a ton of cartoons in the 80s, you know, that were superhero themed. They all had little comics and toy lines that went with them. I think maybe it was Batman, the animated series, that got me into DC for the first time. I don't think I had read any DC titles before that show came along. But that got me into DC in a big way, particularly like with Batman's rogues gallery of villains. Like I thought they were like all weird and wacky and crazy. And then I know that I had read some X-Men comic books before the cartoon came out, but I think the cartoon really cemented it for me. That first run of the Fox Kids X-Men show just totally like that was my team. That was the stories I wanted to know about. I loved how they were all so different from each other. They all had like wild and crazy powers, and like they could be different depending on like, you know, what type of mutant you were, and like some were like super powerful. And then as in like when I got to college, like my first semester of college, I got into the Sandman, and I really started to read like more graphic novels, quote unquote. Like I wanted to read the ones that were like weird or unusual. So like I read 30 Days of Night, and I read a lot of stuff by Neil Gaiman, you know, not just the Sandman series, but a lot of his like standalone things that he did with Dave McKean. So yeah, and that's where and ElfQuest, which no one else seems to know about.
So interesting to hear you got into comics in the 80s. In the 70s, because I'm a little bit older, I started watching something called the Super Friends on TV. And of course, at the time, I thought it was amazing, but realizing later it wasn't the highest art of comics, but it was amazing for my little, 10-year-old brain. And of course, it introduced me to all of the DC. And as I got older, I started to collect, Wonder Woman and Supergirl and Spider-Girl, all of the girl superheroes. And I found that incredibly fulfilling to be able to see continuing stories, primarily of Wonder Woman. That is my one true love. And I love that the adventures continued. And that was how I ended up getting into comics.
Mine was my father. Every Sunday morning, he wanted to go down to the magazine stores, and he'd buy his boating magazines, and he put me in front of the comic book rack, and I discovered Fantastic Four like in the first year that they were being published, and just fell in love with all the characters and the artwork. And as it evolved, I got more and more into it, and then I would copy the pictures and try to draw like Jack Kirby, which is totally impossible. And just really fell in love with it that way. And then it became all the Marvel comics. And then there was certain DC things that just caught me. Neil Adams on Batman, I just couldn't resist anything. So I started buying everything that had his covers on it. And Uh, just all of those. And my favorite Wonder Woman series was when she lost all her powers and she got to wear all those groovy white outfits. And I know it wasn't popular to a lot of readers, but I really enjoyed that season with her. So that's pretty much how it went. And then it just kept growing into an obsession and I got old.
Mine was I was gonna chime in with my early exposure with the Saturday, Sunday cartoons, but now that you mention it, my exposure to comics was, I think, since I had memory, because my grandfather was an avid collector of you guys probably don't know it, but there's a Chilean set of comics here in Chile called Condorito, and it's like our local mascot, and it's about slices of life stories. And then there's a very popular Argentinian comic called Mafalda, which is full of also slice of life content and also very political, very left wing. So since 7-year-old, I was like equal rights, and then it went from there. It took off. Then X-Men came and Spider-Man. Those were my two big ones, especially X-Men, because it turns out you can be different and powerful. There's not just one way to be a superhero, and that drove me nuts. That was like, oh, this clicks. This makes sense. And from then on, I just started with just collecting comics. Sometimes downloading them because we don't have great access here in Latin America. 30 Days of Night was an amazing comic series. The sequels not so much, but the first ones hit like a train. I even collected the first Walking Dead comics before they were cool, which really, really, really good comics. And yeah, that was how I got into it.
And for me, because I'm a little closer to Phil's age than I and Mason's age than I am to the rest of you, I also, as a very young child, was watching, the Adam West Batman series, the Linda Carter Wonder Woman series, which, I mean, iconic. One of the most beautiful women who's ever lived, playing the most beautiful woman in comics. I mean, what's not to love? And I read at a very early age, and I don't have a clear memory of probably a gas station or diner discovering comics when we used to have the old spinner racks. And the first thing that I remember reading was the original Phoenix saga in X-Men. Obviously, I imprinted on that like a baby bird, a baby firebird, if you will, and kind of grew up. And I read, pretty much everything over time, but obviously also really heavily imprinted on the X-Men for a number of reasons, not the least of which being that, from a pretty early age, I understood like, oh, this is a metaphor for everything else. This is a metaphor for anyone who's been othered. And, that included people of color, that included disabled people, that included queer people. Ultimately, that has come to include fat people. As a teenager hanging out at the comic shop, that eventually turned into a job, that eventually turned into running a comic shop, which is a very difficult job, but one that I really loved. And I've been here ever since.
All of that is wonderful. I have to admit, coming into this episode, my reference point for comics is minimal. My consumption of superhero content, as it were, is primarily through things like the MCU, through the 50 million revamps of Superman and Batman that I have seen over the course of my lifetime, through DC, and the various different extended properties, So my coming into is more from the cinematic, I suppose, more than the comics themselves. But certainly what's been interesting, and especially being friends with someone like Tim, who has these specific reference points, is we've had the opportunity to watch through things together, specifically things that he's been very passionate about, like Sandman, X-Men 97, and there'll be these moments where it seems like, oh, there's something happening in a scene, and he'll pause it and he'll go, now you don't know this, but back in the comic, or back in this moment, this is what this was about, and this was kind of what that was referencing, and so it all kind of pulls in together. And so first of all, wonderful having a friend like that who's able to bring some more light and brilliance to the things that we're witnessing. But certainly my understanding, again, purely through the cinematic, is just how much of a layered sense of narrative there is within comics. I think so often in a TV show or in cinematic anything that gets presented, it's very, here is the situation, here's the moment, here's the answer. And you're kind of like, okay, took you $100 million to make this happen, but great, you managed to tell a 3-part story, congratulations. And then there's something like X-Men 97, which, when I think about it, has to rank in terms of like some of the most incredible bits of cinema that I've ever witnessed. And I'm like, goddamn, all this came from like this concept, this comic, this thing. And so clearly there is so much here to delve into and unpack. And so I say this as, again, the media person, I'm very excited to hear what all of you will have to say about the comics. So listen, before we get into the power sets, let's say, that get attributed to fat characters in comics, what does the fat representation look like overall? Is it good? Is it bad? What does it look like when we see fat people in comics?
To me, it always seems like a bit of a mixed bag. You know, like you have overweight superheroes, you have overweight supervillains. Their power sets can be a bit questionable. Now, like if you take someone like the Blob, for instance, you know, he was invented back in the 60s, right? You know, taking the name from the horror movie about the gelatinous monster that eats everything in its path, you know. But it was the 1960s. I can't exactly like, you know, because some of the you asked me, James, you said some of these superheroes have some very silly names. And I'm like, yes, but remember, these characters were invented in like the 30s, the 40s, the 60s. Like they just pulled something out of the air and said, yeah, that's, I think Stan Lee himself said that in the very beginning, like before he had created the Hulk or before he had created Iron Man or anything like that, he would just say like, I would just come up with a word like Mongor, and then we would write like a monster named Mongor. So where was I going with this? Oh, but so like the Blob, yeah, a supervillain, fat. His power set mostly has to do with his weight and the fact that he can, you know, create a gravity field around himself so it becomes immovable. As far as like other superheroes, yeah, they usually have some pretty silly powers when they're overweight. So I don't know. The representation is kind of spotty.
I would say largely not great, unfortunately. Up until really the last maybe 10 years, generally fat characters, obese characters are portrayed as villainous. It is very frequently a visual shorthand, especially in Marvel and DC, for evil, corrupted, you know, negative characters. Blob is a really interesting example, and I promise not to make this about my comic boyfriend friend Dukes the Blob, but that's an interesting character. You're exactly right, Tim. In the 60s, he was created. I mean, he's kind of a joke. You know, even up through like the animated series X-Men Evolution, Blob is a joke. He's an extended fat joke. And then you get a writer like Leah Williams who got onto X-Men and said, okay, but why can't Blob also be hot? Why can't we make Blob a three-dimensional character? And she did. And the modern portrayals of that character are sympathetic, and not in a way of, oh, poor you, your power makes you a big fat tub of lard. But it makes him sympathetic. It's like, no, this is a person.
He's great. I love what they've done with him. I fucking love him now. Like, and just like the way that they drew him for the extremist, you know, that silhouette of him against the setting sun, and I think it's Psylocke, because I think he forms a relationship with Psylocke. You know, like just that the curve of that belly as it overhangs, and I'm like, oh my god, they actually made him sexy.
He's extremely sexy in the modern comics, and he's extremely sympathetic, and he's not really any longer a villain. You know, through the entire Krakoan age, which is the most recent era of X-Men, you know, they made him the bartender at the tiki bar. So he's kind of everybody's bestie. And he's great. And what a fantastic way to redeem a character who is, up till now, extremely one note.
Yeah, I was about to chime in with Blob. Blob is an excellent example. Blob actually had a romantic relationship in Age of X, if I'm not mistaken, with Psylocke, actually. And he was portrayed as desirable, you know, as sexy, as sweet, as adorable, and is a telling of Blob that we usually don't get. My problem with comics and fat people in general is that it's either hot or cold. Like they're either a joke or they're a villain. But despite being full figured, they're not a full character to me. You know, they're usually defined by their size, but I would love to see another dimension to them. Sorry, I keep going with the puns about size. But yeah, like for example, the Blob is a really good example because he has had growth, you know. In the Krakoan era, I loved every time they drew him because he was just behind the counter serving everybody drinks. He looked happy, you know, and I love to see fat people happy in comics, and that is a thing that I don't usually see. I love happy. I love fun. And we got to see that for a fat character. I love that.
You know, I looked into some historical references for fat representation in comics, and some of the things that I found were Bouncing Boy and
Yes.
Limp.
Yeah, I think a fetishist wrote those.
He is able
100%.
to bounce and inflate. Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. And then there's one that Mason told me about, and that's Herbie. And maybe you can talk about Herbie.
Herbie, I found Herbie when I was a little kid, when I was a fat little kid wearing glasses. And Herbie was a fat little comic book character, wore glasses, and his parents were always making comments about him being fat and harassing him. And it was never quite clear if he really was a superhero or if he was imagining all these things. But he was the first comic book character that I really identified with. And he was a hero, at least in his own mind. And it was really an enjoyable book. And I wish they would reprint the whole series because I would love to reread it all. It was a real, and he was cute. He had a little lollipop that he was always chewing on, and he was always in his little shirt and tie and his pants pulled up too high. And then he wore long underwear as the Fat Fury. And but it was all, he was never portrayed as negative in his own mind, which is a hard thing to overcome. So I think that's why I liked him, because he overcame it.
James and I, we actually looked him up, Herbie, the lollipop superhero. And when we looked at the power set,
all sorts.
yeah, when we looked at the power set, we're like, this guy can actually rewrite reality. Like, this might be one of the most powerful superheroes in any comic universe. And it all has to do with that lollipop.
And he was just unfazed. They were describing it like, apparently, like, the entire spaceship around him could be destroyed, and he would just be like, oh well, and then just sort of like float back to Earth and go about his day. And it's like a character that is so powerful that, one, unfazed by like cosmic destruction, but also two, just to be like, meh.
He and Jamie Braddock probably hang out a lot.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Jamie Braddock is a lot, but yeah, it's funny, Phil, because you mentioned DC Comics and like, you know, the fetishistic aspect. DC in particular, I have maintained for years that whoever was writing for DC in the Golden, Silver, and Bronze Age, DC has a lot of especially weight-related fetish on display.
Mm-hmm.
There are issues of almost every like Silver and Bronze Age character getting fat as a joke for like a single issue, like, you know, oh no, Flash is 500 pounds. What'll he do? It's like, guys, come on.
Yeah, that was
Or the one where Superman balloons up and actually explodes out of the phone booth.
Yes.
This was the trope of every 90s cartoon. And again, I think this is something we talked on one of our very first episodes of the podcast, which was like cartoons of the 90s. It just felt like everything that was on Nickelodeon had an unavoidable episode in which, for whatever reason, the characters got fat for the day. And it was like, oh no, I'm so big and round. And then like somehow they magically got thin by the end of it, ready for the next episode. But it was just like, I never clocked in my early years. Like, those were always my favorite episodes of every single show. And it's like, yeah, I just think the writing was really good, you know? I just
It gave you them butterflies in your stomach that came back later on.
Yes! well, yeah.
But it's the
Everybody who can, people who can potentially pinpoint the birth of their fetish know exactly what that sensation is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's the meme from Community with the dean looking at the computer and the pictures of Dalmatians. Like, this better not awaken anything in me.
Yeah, 100%. Cut to 10 years later and I'm stuffing pillows under my jumper like, why does this feel so good? Like, bury that tease, bury that fantasy. It was actually kind of fun doing some research into this because, frankly, my only knowledge, again, point of reference was characters like the Blob. I had said to Tim at the time, like, do they have gravity-related powers? Do they just be so big and fat and just big fatty power, big fatty boomba power? Like, do you know? And then it was like, who is it? Oh, the most prominent one in Marvel? Big Bertha! Oh, her power is she can make herself fat. And then in order to become thin, has to poke and choke herself.
Yeah, I don't know how that got past standards and practices. That's terrible.
Like, I just... Ugh. But of course, like, she can't look beautiful necessarily in her bigness, right? Like all the pictures of her face, she looks monstrous because she's, this immovable force being punched or being pushed and pulled. And so, even in that, there's no like glory or wonder. It's just big old fucking.
Well, how about the fact that she doesn't wear? Okay, so just in terms of like logic within comics, because I know that's a stretch and you have to suspend a lot of disbelief. But like the fact that she makes her money as a supermodel when she's thin, and then she does her superhero gig as the big girl, and she doesn't wear a mask, and she's got the same hairstyle, and everybody could plainly see that, like, oh, that's her. It's like,
Well,
and but then again, everybody also must, I mean, the people must know how she returns to normal size.
not necessarily, girl, because we as gainers love a before and after photo, and I think each and every one of us can pick people in this community who we look at their skinny photos, we look at their big ass selves now, and we would not necessarily be able to tell that that was the same person.
Mm.
In the same regard as
Yeah.
the weight loss before and after photo, like it's a very strong tropism that this transformation of size and shape indicates that there is a shifting of the person, that we have become something new, something to be recognized and acknowledged for that difference. And so I don't know. The thing I thought that was unrealistic is that she became a multimillionaire supermodel based in Milwaukee. Like, I don't know that Milwaukee, Wisconsin is known for anything other than...
Yeah, it's not exactly a fashion mecca, is it? I didn't think about that because she's part of the Great Lakes Guardians, so
Right. And one of the things you have to kind of recognize that is kind of like ecstatics. Great Lakes Avengers is mostly a joke book. Like, nothing, I mean, it does exist in the Marvel Universe, but nothing in it is really taken that seriously. But occasionally you get a breakout character from it that does kind of transition into the wider world and get taken seriously. Squirrel Girl is a great example. Speaking of our Thicc Radio, I mean, she was a Great Lakes Adventures. Like, okay, her thing is squirrels. Like, really? But now everybody loves her. She's in Marvel Rivals. She's in. I think it's also interesting that in it. Speaking of Marvel Rivals, as they add more characters, does anybody else notice that all of the character models for that are a lot thicker than their comic counterparts? Like, I don't know why they decided to make Emma Frost mommy in it, but she's great. She's got big, thick thighs and a fat ass and a big waist, and she looks great.
Oh, yes. I play Rivals every single day with my husband. We try to max out the challenges. And first of all, Squirrel Girl, she is thick. I love it. The thing about this game is that I think it also represents how the perspective is changing, is shifting a little bit about how a superhero can look. Because even in every skin that Squirrel Girl has, she continues to be thick. She continues to show that booty, those thick thighs. And Emma, Jesus Christ. I mean, if you actually put her next to the other blonde girls, side note, this game has too many blonde chicks, but whatever. Like, Emma is huge and unapologetically huge. And I love it because she commands power with that size. And it shows you as well that you can take some characters and portray them bigger, and it doesn't break the mold. It doesn't break the narrative of that character. Like, oh, it's not comically accurate. It is. That's Emma. That's Emma, and she's big, and I love it. Also, Venom. Like, they give him a huge booty. That just an honorable mention.
I mean, no one is mad that they made Magneto daddy thick either.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, no.
Oh my goodness. I must say, no, sorry, my mind just got filled with comic book ass, and now my point has just gone completely out of my head.
James is picturing Captain America.
No, don't give a fuck about Chris Evans. Tom Hardy, though, as Venom. I've never seen the films, but I would absolutely.
Well, that's because it's Tom Hardy.
Tom, make me Hardy.
Exactly.
Do you know? I just listen, Linda, listen. The man is beautiful. The man is beautiful.
Those movies are trash, but I say that with love. Like, they're a lot of fun, but they're garbage.
Yeah, like
I still haven't seen any of them yet. I've been putting it off because, like, I don't know. Like, for one thing, like, yeah, Venom's cool, but I don't know. I was never really into him. Like, I liked the whole what was it? The separation anxiety storyline with the symbiote Spawn. But I don't know. Venom's not really my thing.
He suffers from a problem a lot of 90s characters do, which is introduced as a villain, but then they're so popular that the company goes, oh, wait, So now we have to kind of make them heroic. And it's like, he literally wants to eat Spider-Man.
If I'm going to go for an anti-hero, I usually go for Elektra.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, now listen, I want to bring it back for a second because I want to query, Mason, you had mentioned about the Herbert the Lollipop Kid, and, I wonder if there have been examples of, like, other gainer kinks and tropes that have popped up in comics for various reasons. Like, have we ever seen a Blueberry moment occur where someone was like, oh, this was inspired by the whole Willy Wonka of it all, and then the Bloobs were just like, holy shit, this is amazing. Like, have we seen any kind of, like, gainer tropisms, an example of male pregnancy, perhaps? I would imagine with Ant-Man, like, macro is a big thing as well. But yeah, have we seen examples of other gainer kinks in comics as well as just fatness itself?
I haven't. I really haven't. I mean, to me, it's all very sparse, and the fat characters that have all been villains have not really appealed to me. And I hated those 60s Superman got fat comics. And I did like Wonder Woman's sidekick. What's her name?
Etta Candy.
I liked her a lot. She was strong and powerful, and she was cute. But I haven't seen really, I've seen Mr. Fantastic and the Fantastic Four blow up like a balloon to save them so they could float to Earth. But Jack Kirby never made things erotic in that respect. I can't say I can. Maybe the other people can, but I really can't say that I have.
Etta Candy, played by Lucy Davis in the Wonder Woman film, is one of the best things in that movie. And at no point is her size in that film played as a joke. She just happens to be a bigger person.
I like that a lot, too.
I do, too.
She played Aunt Hilda in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, right?
She sure did.
Yes.
I don't know if I can think of any examples of other gainer fetishism that I've seen. Oh, Fuad, have you seen some?
Fuad throws his
Yes.
head. He's like, yes!
I have, but I might be a bit biased because I might be just a little slutty and I just see things where they're not. But yes, I have several actually. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Venom, but Venom does have some kink seeds that, while visually they're not evident, I think the imagery is still there. So Venom is a symbiote, right? He bonds with his host. In the lore, he has said, or they have said, that they can take any form they want, but traditionally Venom, after bonding with what's his name after Peter? I keep drawing a blank.
Eddie Brock.
Eddie Brock.
Thank you. They keep choosing a big boy body. They don't choose wings. They don't choose a beak. They don't choose skinny. They don't choose the traditional muscular. They choose a power lifter build. And that is interesting that this creature, this out of space creature, is like, oh, I do like feeling big. I do like feeling muscular. And it's not necessarily functional because we know that the symbiotes can just travel any way they choose. So for me, that's one aspect. The other aspect is that sometimes it overlaps with the vor kink because he goes around devouring people, Another example I have many, is, macro and micro vor with the pin particles. The imagery is still there. I am so sure that many people with the macro vor, like those comics, Ant-Man, Giant Man, that's their jam. Or at least that had to spark something in them. You know what I mean? The other one this is a little weird. There's, maybe Jean can help me here. There's this race of aliens that the X-Men battle a lot. And they work by getting you pregnant. They
actually
The Brood.
Yeah. There's one imagery of, I think it's Cyclops' dad, and he has the full pregnant belly. And while I'm not really into MPreg, I was like, is something awake? It sparked something in me because he was holding the belly and it was kind of hot. But that's another example I thought of.
Yeah, the Brood definitely has a little bit of an MPreg thing. Usually when you see those kind of the kind of secondary gainer kinks, they're usually not portrayed in a hot way. There is a storyline where Deadpool gets pregnant, but Deadpool is a whole other thing that we could spend days on. but like for example, like with Vor, usually when Vor is portrayed in comics, it's from a horror perspective. So, you know, like there's Ultimate Comics, you know, in the Ultimates, there's a pretty infamous, gross storyline where Blob eats the Wasp when she's short, and it's gross. You know, it's more portrayed as like a horrible thing happening to a woman than it is like, oh, this is hot, he ate her. So that's a touchy.
Yeah, it was very B movie type of, you know, yeah.
I do have one that I remembered after you left me. Vampirella, which I loved the Vampirella comic book. And back in 1974, because we looked it up to pinpoint it, there was a story where she goes to the Middle East. She's visiting some prince and he falls in love with her. But there's this woman that is already part of his harem and he loves her. And she tries to kill Vampirella. And the prince at the end of the story, Vampirella and her sidekick have left. And at the end of the story, he tells her, I know I promised I would never harm you, and I never will harm you. And he starts force feeding her with a contraption that you would feed a goose to fatten them up. And he's going to just feed her to death. And the last panel of her, she's like 1,000 pounds, and she's trapped there as he's going to just continue feeding her 24 hours a day until she dies.
And that storyline is called Vampirella and the Sultana's Revenge.
Because you knew good and goddamn well that everybody listening was like, what is the name of the comic? Tell me now!
And I have to say, in terms of Vor, there was a scene in The American Gods, and they had it in when they did the movie. The actual literary, book just went into much more detail about how she swallowed up this guy, and he was so into it. And the description on the page, it was wild. Not that I'm necessarily into Vor, but it was Neil Gaiman just wrote it so well. Like there had to be some input from someone to write it the way he did, because it was pure, sexy Vor. Like wow.
I think he must have read a fan fiction or something, and
Queen of Sheba? Because I've only seen a couple of episodes.
yeah, it was Bilquis, the
Yes.
Queen of Sheba. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
where she consumes the offering vaginally and they wind up in some kind of interdimensional bliss zone. Like, listen, I'm sure.
I saw that.
Listen, I imagine there are worse ways to go, frankly. You know, if I was trapped for eternity in like a sexual bliss and offering to someone, like, there are
Well,
worse ways.
I feel like we have to also be a little bit upfront about Neil Gaiman as another one of those writers, particularly in light of things that are coming out. Neil Gaiman is another writer. It's like, ooh, there's a lot of really uncomfortable fetishes on display, which, for the record, would not be uncomfortable if they were just fetishes. In his case, in real life, where they have clearly veered into abuse, allegedly. But
I hope that I hope it's not true. You know, I've been reading him since I was in college, so
it's a rough time to be a Gaiman fan of his work, and I say this as somebody with a Sandman tattoo.
Yeah.
Oh.
Doesn't feel great.
Yeah, I mean, I want the Endless tattooed on me as well. Like yeah, exactly. It's the key to hell. Exactly. I want that as well. Like it's not easy to really love something, and like I assume that this is what Harry Potter fans have also gone through. It's just this fucking sucks.
Let's deviate for a second there, and speak to that point. As much as we might love a lot of these comics or other forms of media, and maybe they were brilliant, and maybe they hold up even now, where the story itself is something wonderful. Maybe sometimes authors or illustrators or people in conjunction with the product wind up not being necessarily great, right? I want to ask for each of you, how do you walk that line when it comes to appreciating the thing that has been created, whilst also acknowledging the person behind it? How do you manage that?
I can jump in here. And not that it's easy, but I think it's important to be able to separate the art from the artist. As a writer, like when I finish my book, I feel like I have given birth to that. And it takes on a life of its own after the artwork is completed. People read into it. People can write fan fiction from it. I mean, my story, Fat is in, started as fans fiction from Judge Dredd, the League of Fatties. So, I think it's important to be able to do that, and it may not always be easy, but I think once the piece of art is birthed, it becomes its own entity. And I think to be able to appreciate that separate from, the actions of the artist, I think it's a beginning and a way to move forward. But again, I know it's just not easy.
For me, I think that depends entirely upon whether or not the artist is still living and benefiting from consumption of the work. Personally, I will never spend money on another Neil Gaiman project or stream anything that gets him a cent. Same with J.K. Rowling. Same with Joss Whedon. I think that, once someone no longer has an estate, once that person is no longer benefiting from that, and in particular, like in the case of Rowling, every cent you spend on Harry Potter merchandise funds her actively discriminating against trans people. Please don't do that. I say this as a trans non-binary person. Please don't consume Harry Potter. I understand for a lot of people these things are very important. I was a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. I don't want to give money to an abuser. I am a huge Neil Gaiman fan of his work. And really in his case, as a person too, or as the person he presented himself to be. On the other hand, I'm a horror fan. I love the writing of H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft was a terrible person, but he's dead. He's been dead for a long time. Me reading the Cthulhu mythos doesn't fund any hateful agenda anymore. And I think that for me, that's where I draw that line.
I can understand that because that makes sense as to why Wagner is still performed or why Birth of a Nation is sometimes shown in film class. I'm always torn with this one. I have a hard time with this one. It's just, it's like I assume this is what people who were fans of Michael Jackson went through. Or like I said, people who were fans of Harry Potter series. Like I struggle. It's hard because I still love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I still love The Sandman. I don't know where I'm going to end up on that journey. Hopefully, I can let it go as time goes on. The more time that goes in between, like first experiencing it and where I am now, it's like, so.
Sandman to me is a really tough one because there are a lot of things that Sandman does really right, even if they haven't aged super well. I mean, the portrayal of Wanda as one of the first trans characters in comics, is it great by today's standards? No, but for the time that it was written, it was absolutely groundbreaking. And frankly, there are plenty of plus-size characters in Sandman who are not presented as jokes, who are presented as well-rounded characters. I mean, Gilbert, the incarnation of Fiddler's Green, is one of the best characters in that series.
Or Despair, she's an obese woman and she's a cosmic being.
Right. There are things that series does really right. And unfortunately, it was created by someone who is probably a monster.
Oh yes, 100%. Well, I just agree a lot with what Jean says. It's just that it's not that we're on a journey to say that the art itself is bad, because we fell in love with these characters. I guess I still am a huge Buffy fan, and I don't think it's a journey that has to take me to the place that I separate myself fully from the love that I have for that story, but I also have to do the inner work to realize that if I keep supporting this person, if I keep giving them agency, if I keep empowering them, then they are gonna, feel this agenda to do what they want to do, and it's pretty awful, that matters more than my personal feelings towards a certain project or art, and if they're dead, then go off,
Like, so, you guys are saying you don't want, like Jeannie said, you won't stream anything because that does put money in someone's pocket. In like the case of Buffy, I bought all the DVD sets back in the early 2000s. So they already got their money from me. If I rewatch those, am I contributing?
No,
because that's the monetary, which is really the issue. Well, not the issue, but it's a big issue, right? Like, it's platforming individuals, giving them your money, and then the money goes doing the thing. Listen, I'm gonna say this as a young millennial: pirate that shit. If, let's say, you were a Harry Potter fan, You loved the concept of what those books brought. Tim, you and I have talked about this. I was a young millennial in the early 90s, early 2000s, where it was like, hey, are you othered, young fag? Absolutely. Oh, there's a special place for me where everything is magically answered. Brilliant. Of course that appeals to the young mind. But it turns out that was a world funded by someone who was not a great person. So what do I do with that? Look for something else. There are truly so many other authors now. And listen, as much as J.K. Rowling might be a terrible person for everything she's doing, the bitch did what she did enough to the point that it inspired more people to become writers. We are seeing a real resurgence in the indie book genre. We are seeing such a surgence of people saying, listen, I liked ideas of this. What if I put my own spin on it? I'm a person of color. What if I created a world which centered me and my experience and had that as the form of expression? And so all of that does exist out there. There are more things under the sun, and we need to find more opportunities to engage in that. So first of all, look for alternatives. Second of all, pirate. Absolutely. Please pirate those things and do not give them their money. Make it a point to pirate it. We are already seeing moves and actions in the world with, for example, people who own car companies that maybe do Nazi salutes. We have seen that in 4 months since that time, at the time of recording, that the company has lost over 75 to 80% of their entire total social monetary value. Like, it happens, y'all. We have power. People say no to things and things shift and change. And I promise, I'm not trying to be all ranty and political about all this stuff. I'm just saying. There is more that we can do as an individual that if enough of us go ahead and do the thing, that we can see shift and change. I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
I'm going to agree with you. And to bring that back to comics, I want to say that along that same line, comics have always been inherently political.
Yes.
And don't let anybody who tells you otherwise get another word out of their dumb mouth because they're wrong.
Yeah, because they've obviously never read them. Because, oh, X-Men's woke now. Bitch, X-Men has been woke since the 60s.
My favorite argument ever, X-Men went woke. Baby, have you read a Chris Claremont comic?
You got 30, you got almost 50 years worth of backlog to go through. You can, and they got pictures, so, you know, it might make it easier for you if you're one of them people who have that problem. Like, just read the damn comics.
Superman was created by 2 Jews in the 40s. Listen, comics are political.
The only good thing to come out of Cleveland was Superman.
You're not wrong.
And you,
I know I'm not wrong. I live here.
And you, bitch.
Oh, I'm not good.
Fine. Season 17 of Drag Race winner on your nerve, okay? There are some good things that come out of Cleveland. God.
Whatever gave you the impression I was good?
Anyway.
Well, I had you snowballed.
But yes, your point is correct. And I agree with you on piracy. I have a friend with a Plex server. I just recently rewatched Buffy. There's a lot of things in it that, problematic. But overall, still a pretty good show. Still some really good messages in it.
But I want to quickly circle back here to you, Mason. We didn't necessarily get the chance to come to you. On that original point of separating art from artist and processing maybe some discomfort if you've come across people who produce things that you like, but maybe those people aren't too terribly great. Have you encountered that much? And if so, what do you do when you come across that?
I myself can't separate the art from the artist unless, like others have said, the artist is dead. Then it doesn't bother me. But no, if they're living and they're like J.K. Rowling's still professing these points that are so horrible about living, she's saying horrible things about living people. So as long as she's doing that, no, I can't contribute any money to anything she's doing. I came out in 1972, and in 1972 there was a gay community. In the gay community, at that point, there wasn't a flag, but everything that's represented on that flag was all at the same Mattachine dance because it's the only place to go. And we all got along. Everybody was like, "Oh, cool! You want to be a girl? That's cool. I like the way you're dressed." It didn't have that. Oh, you just want to get into a locker room. There was none of that at all. It was just all these people that got together that were part of a gay community, and it was fun. And I hated the way the gay community splintered into a million different groups. And it's like, "Oh, you're a bear." No, you're a fat guy with a beard, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like you have to separate yourself from the twinks, or are the twinks separate? And who came up with twink? You're a young, good-looking, slim guy. Great, good for you. And it
Well, I
just
think it was a reference to Twinkies, right? Like the
uh,
confection, because like tall, skinny,
cute,
blonde,
delicious.
Full of
cute, full of
cream.
cum.
Okay, okay, that makes it better actually. Thank you. But I don't like the separation in our community at all. That's
Well, one of the things I think is beautiful about an episode like this, and really comics in general, at least I'm not saying again, I've not been to any cons. I don't know the broader spectrum of this shit, right? But what I do know of is the kind of people the people who are here. And what I find is that there is such a community that comes together with that shared interest. And not just, oh, I like this, that's the end of the story, but there is so much narrative, that there is so much to unpick and unpack and dig through. And I find that to be so enjoyable. Also, Fuad, like having a little chocolate bar off the side there, that was really low.
Don't call him out like that.
No, it's cute, baby. Eat more. You
Why are
go.
you gonna come for me like that?
Well, when a bald bitch
Oh.
like this has no edges to be snatched, I have to snatch them off of others, so that
Fair.
I've got to let them have it. But no, listen, on the thing, on Fat Heroes, Fat Comics, right? Tim and I did some digging into this, and I made my joke earlier that, like, does Fatty only have, like, gravity and immovable force power? And that seems to be the majority. The majority of fat characters, their ability is fat, as in becoming fat, being, like, taking a beating because they are fat. The only notable example that we saw, like, majorly, was a villain called Microbe, and I was like, oh, okay, so, like, germs, like, that's different. And then we saw the images, and I was like, oh, so it's
They draw flies around him.
because fat man stink. Right, okay. And I was
Yeah.
like, God fucking damn it. You had one,
And he had really sickly, like sallow looking. Like I know he's supposed to be walking pestilence, but like then why make him fat? Why not make him, thin and emaciated, like he's been ravaged by disease or something?
So anyways, we did the looking. That seems to be the majority of fat superpowers out there. I'd like to put it to the group, if you've come across a fat superhero that does not have any of those typical powers, who are they? What do they do? Tell us about them.
Oh, I have an example, I think. Gold balls. Not
Egg.
necessarily fat, related, but he is big. He shoots balls out of his body.
Eggs.
And eggs. Well,
Yeah.
First they called them balls, and then it turns out they were eggs. And he was a key part of the Krakoan resurrection protocols. So that could be an example that is not necessarily defined by his size, or his power set is not fat.
One of the few that I found, and not a major character, Valiant Comics publishes a book called Faith, and she is a plus size superheroine.
Oh, yes, I was going to reference it. Her name is Zephyr, correct?
Yeah, Zephyr's great. And I mean, and again, that's a case where the size doesn't have anything to do with the character. It doesn't have to do with the powers. She doesn't have, density control or mass or gravity or anything like that. She's just a superhero, and she happens to be fat.
And she can fly.
And she can fly.
Amazing.
That came out, I think, like 8 years ago at least at this point.
Yeah.
And it was so delightful to see that she just happened to be fat, in addition to being able to fly and not have any of those other stereotypical elements attributed to her.
As a comic book character, not a superhero, but I always liked Foggy Nelson in Daredevil. He was Matt's best friend. He got involved with Daredevil's adventures, but he was just like a real down-to-earth person. And he just happened to be chubby, but they never made chubby bad. It wasn't drawn attention to. He still had the same beautiful women and dated beautiful women just like Matt did.
Mm.
And I just thought he was a lawyer. He was educated. Suits. It was a positive character, and he was a chubby guy. So I always liked him in Daredevil.
Yeah, Eldon Henson in the Daredevil TV show was, it was fine to look at during the Netflix run, and then his one episode appearance in the MCU, and I was like, oh, he's gained weight since he was on Netflix. Yum, yum, yum. I'm very much looking forward to this. And then things happened, and I was devastated. I was like, how dare you take this man away from me? He was so gorgeous. I felt the same thing in Eternals when they killed off the man who played Methuselah is what's in my head, but that wasn't his fucking name. What was his name? Tim, you know comics. What was his name?
I don't really know I don't know the Eternals. I know the Externals better than I know the Eternals.
Oh, what was his name? Listen.
You're talking about Brian Tyree Henry as the actor.
No. But Brian Tyree Henry, yes. And I cannot remember the name of the actor. Hang on, just one. Gilgamesh. He played
Gilgamesh.
Yes.
The Korean chubby bear actor who played Gilgamesh. And I was like...
Oh, he's adorable.
He is adorable.
Fucking beautiful. And I was like,
If you like horror, he's also in Train to Busan, and he's great in that.
God. But once again, killed off. Like, how rude.
Well, and both of those represent something that happens quite a bit, both in comics and then when they're adapted, is you see that fat characters get considerably slimmed down over time. DC Comics did that with Amanda Waller, who used to be a very large woman. And, you know, in the comics, they've slimmed her down over time. And then when they brought her into movies, she's a normally proportioned woman. It's like, oh, okay, you could have just cast a bad actor.
Benedict Wong as Sorcerer Supreme in the MCU has trimmed down, and that devastates me because he had a beautiful big belly and seemed to, like, have great flow and motion in the original Doctor Strange movie, and then just every movie has, like...
Volstagg in the Thor films, I always refer to as Slim Fast Volstagg, because that character is literally a third the size he should be. And he's still portrayed as fat, and there's a lot of fat jokes about him in the movie.
Now, once again, character we need a question here. Fat Thor. First of all, that man went fat. Where's the fat? Where is that? That soft, like, muscle boy didn't hit the gym for 2 seconds, soft titty situation they got going on? Is that what we're talking about? That was not fat. For me.
A prosthetic beer belly does not make an actor fat.
No. And we're not going to get into the whale of it all, quite frankly. But I need to ask, of course, of everyone here, how do we feel about Fat Thor? Are we pro-Fat Thor, or are we no more Thor?
I would have been okay with it if he had actually put on the weight. You know, if he had Drew Manning that shit, I would have been fine with it, but not with the prosthetic they came up with.
He does get a moment that I appreciate, which is when he reclaims the hammer and realizes that despite everything implied to be his weight gain, that he is still worthy. I appreciate that, but A, he's not really fat, as you said, and B, then they immediately take Chris Hemsworth out of the fat suit, and it's like, okay, so what happened there? He's just thin again. Okay.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like Fat Thor. It feels like a cheap blow. Like, fat. And it's okay. Yeah, you got me. I'm fat. And like, it just feels very cheap. And also, I'm right there with Tim. Like, if he actually gained the weight, we would see it, because you don't just get fat in the belly. You get fat in the chest. You get fat in the face. You know, your fingers get like sausagey, or I don't know.
They didn't make his ass any bigger, did they? I don't remember.
No, but unfortunately...
No, they did not.
No, but I must speak for my white people. Unfortunately, we do have a propensity to pancake that situation through weight gain, so, like, that at least, you know...
Well, not if you have a solid muscle base to build off of. Like, if he had glutes to begin with, he should have had a dump truck by the time he got to...
He should have had a badonkadonk. He had the real estate, yeah.
Now, Phil, Mason, what do you think of Fat Thor?
I think it was for laughs. It didn't. I thought it was cheap, a cheap take. So not a fan.
But no, he wasn't going to stay that way.
It's played as a setup for the one joke where Tony calls him Lebowski, and that's about all there is to it. Henry.
I don't like the fact that they were like, oh, we finally included gay romance in a Marvel film by putting Brian Tyree Henry as a black silhouette against another form who only gets referred to in gender one time as another man, have a kiss, and then see that person not be queer again at any other point, make no other references. And yet MCU was like, oh, we had full-blown fucking, like, gay homosexuality fucking up and on this bitch.
So it was like when Disney was like, LeFou is the first openly gay character. Blink and you'll miss the scene where he twirls with another man.
Yeah, well, like, RuPaul's Drag Race
seconds.
is about to once again have their first trans fucking something or other, and it's like, can we stop with this when it's not going to be the thing. Like, unless I have the full offering, like, it's not, and I don't like being fucking goaded. Queerbaiting, you know, it's not great. I'm not a fan.
Disney loves to play our first queer character. Like, have you watched your own movies? Because every villain has been gay coded from the beginning. But you know, as far as the MCU goes, I agree with you about Eternals. That movie is a mess anyway. Thank God we finally got Agatha all along with actual queer representation. Well, I think one of the strengths of Agatha all along is that basically everyone in that cast is interesting looking in a not conventionally attractive way. I mean, Sashir Zamata is probably the closest to what you would think of as conventionally attractive. And I mean, everyone in that cast is gorgeous, but none of them look like models.
Yeah.
Very that.
I wanted her to look like the original Agatha Harkness from the Fantastic Four, though.
Oh,
like you wanted old lady
woman.
Agatha?
Old lady
with the hair.
Yeah, there was something about a super powerful old lady. But I enjoyed the series, but I just kept thinking, it ain't Agatha. That's not.
Well, they didn't do it with Madam Web either, so it shouldn't have been a surprise.
Oh gosh,
that would have been a completely different movie, also. Yeah, and they don't want to direct anything at seniors, so you know, and I can understand that they have a huge young fan base that needs to lay out money for these things.
true.
So.
Madam Web was a disaster. Oh my gosh.
I never even bothered to see it because the minute I saw that it was Dakota Blue, I was like, that ain't that's not Madam Web. I don't know what the hell this is going to be.
I love Madam Web because it's awful. It's camp.
She was in the Amazon with my mother when she died, or whatever the fuck that line was. When you take on the responsibility, power comes to you.
The whole movie is a Pepsi ad.
It is.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely wild. But listen, back on the subject of fat representation, right? So we understand some of the typical powers that get lumped in with that, but we've also discovered and talked about some of the better representation that exists. Squirrel Girl, Zephyr, and, you know, rewritings of the Blob. I'm going to put it out there to y'all. Which publishing house do you think handles fat representation the best, historically?
I'm going to say none of them.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them do. I think there are individual characters, individual storylines that you can highlight from, especially the big two, but none of them do a great job across the board. Obesity is still largely treated as a joke or a problem.
I feel like you're going to see it more often in Vertigo titles, but not necessarily for good reasons, you know?
Well, Vertigo doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, it doesn't? Did it go under? Or did
DC
they become Dark Horse?
No, Dark Horse is a whole other company. DC folded the Vertigo imprint.
Well, I mean, the Vertigo titles that I was reading at the time, I feel like I saw more plus-size people in Vertigo titles.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with Gene. I don't think there's a publisher that is satisfying what we want, but maybe the indie creators are ahead in that area, because I don't see it either.
Well, perhaps Embonpoint Publishing. You know, perhaps they might be known as a publishing house that is known for good. Would you say that, Phil, is an unbiased party? Would you say that that's the case?
I think Embonpoint Publishing is the only publishing company, independent, that has taken a fat character and made them powerful, helped them lead a revolution without using them as the joke or, you know, in a negative viewpoint, if I can say so.
We did make the big mistake of submitting it to Goodreads, and they have a resident hater that has continued over the years to just put review after review after review of totally missing the point of the book. And just because it's fat characters, that we're promoting obesity and we're horrible people and it's trash and it's just one person.
And that's actually something, just to elaborate on just for a second, that there are enough anti-fat people who are anti-health at every size. And I mean, this is a virulent, vicious community, and it's a small community, but they make an effort to put negative reviews on anything that's fat positive. And they're loud and they're everywhere. And so I think anyone who's writing fat comics, is going to have to deal with that group. And I wish to say that it's fine to ignore them, but they're loud and they're there. And that's something that I didn't anticipate in doing the fantasy universe that we have, that there's enough of these people who are so virulently anti-fat that they try and take down any kind of positive representation. And it's a reality, and it's unfortunate, but it's there. So that's something that we have experienced.
It's the same argument we see against representation for queer people, right? Is that any representation of a character who is othered in some way it's glorifying it. You're glorifying obesity. No, obese people exist and should be part of stories. Full stop.
I think their name is Elora Dodd on Instagram. They are a plus-size person on the spectrum who does content, and they put out a very excellent point, which is the brilliance of all of these health nuts who love to say that we're promoting obesity. What a wonderful way of expressing that you have no confidence in your own health journey and everything that you sell and promote. Because I am somehow simultaneously the most disgusting thing you've ever seen in your life, and yet so powerful, so sexy, so alluring, so brilliant that I am convincing everyone around me to become obese because of how fantastic and clearly desirable I am.
Mm.
So there is something to be said that a lot of that rhetoric, it's just flip it on its head on that. But Phil, honestly, and Mace, I appreciate you guys sharing your perspectives from what you've done as a publishing house with Fatizen. And sidebarring here, would you like to talk a little bit about Fatizen? For anyone who has not listened to our Fatizen interview with you, would you like to tell us all a little bit about the Fatizen comics as if we have never heard about it before?
Happy to do so. And I'll be brief. I don't want to take up the whole stage here. So I came out with my debut novel in 2015, Fatizen 24602, prose novel. And at the time that it was published, Mason and I had been together a couple of years, and he wanted to do it as a graphic novel. And so that is the prose.
Here, hold it up so that
Nice.
just
Here we
for
go.
a second.
Yeah, hold it up so when we do the little video bit, we'll have like that in the book in the frame. Perfect. Yeah.
There we go. And it's a story about a woman and her family 70 years in the future, when the diet industry becomes a very strong branch of the federal government and outlaws obesity, puts fat people in concentration camps, which they never leave. And they're called calorie count to help you lose weight. So over the story, her and her family start a revolution and try and bring down the part of the government that is trying to eliminate fat people from existence. And creating it in a graphic novel format allowed us to be able to reach a different segment of society that may not be inclined to read a 400-page book, to have 3 different volumes of Fatizen come out. And Mason truly captured what the characters in my mind look like. And we're really excited to have that out in the world, to be able to tell a story of resilience, that there's room in the world for everyone, that you don't have to be ashamed for being fat, that you don't have to accept pejorative terms for being fat, that you can live a full life, you can have love, and you can have sex, and you can have anything you want, regardless of the size of your body. And that is the essence of the book. And I will say that although it is not a book about feederism, it's not a gainer book, but it is a book that incorporates all of those elements from different parts of society. As I mentioned, it started out as fan fiction for the League of Fatties and Judge Dredd. And so, yeah, in part 2, we see, the feeding contest where people are 800 and 900 pounds, racing to see who can eat the most in a very underground part of society. Because when you try and subjugate and eliminate the fat, it just comes out in other ways. You can't get rid of human nature, all aspects of human nature.
But the other aspect that you left out is that these people are being used under the guise of, you can eat all you want. They're being used by the criminals to make money.
Yeah, it's a
It's multi-leveled. It's not just one viewpoint. It's all the different viewpoints in there. And that's what I liked about it a lot, was that he covered everything. And it applies, if people read beyond the fat, he covers every bit of prejudice and bigotry that's been through history against each individual group. The calorie camps, it's concentration camps. They go in, they don't come out then, they don't come out. They're killed. And then they're turned into food. Oops, given too much away. Never mind.
But segregation is an element that occurs in that as well, separating plus size and thin size, people separating of families, And certainly I'd like to take this moment to encourage everyone to go and listen to our Fat as an episode, because we had the opportunity to read it and speak to Phil at length about this. But I want to defer to you here for a second, Tim, because Mason, we didn't get to have you on the episode. Tim, you had some, I think, quite nice things to say about the artistry, if you'd like to.
Yeah, the art style was very reminiscent of Jack Kirby and of, like it made me look like it looked like a Silver Age comic book, and it was kind of taking me back to, now, I mean, obviously I grew up in the 90s, so like I didn't get a ton of access to those comics, but my uncle collected them. And he used to give me like issues that he was okay with, like, getting rid of from his collection. So looking at that artwork and then looking at yours, I was like, oh, I can see the inspiration here. Like this is amazing. This is like reminding me of, my youth.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it. And you can't help where your influences come from. And yes, it was very much. I've had other people say that to me also, and I take it as a compliment. And thank you very much.
And in the interest of just putting a nice little pin on that, where could individuals, if they were so curious to purchase a copy of Fadderson and check it out for themselves, where could they do that?
You could look it up on Amazon, but you can also go to our website, which is embonpointpublishing.com, and perhaps you can put a link, on the
in the show notes.
That would be great.
And the other thing on there, Phil, I'm no good with computers. If there's anything that's done with a computer, Phil has done it. And he made little movie trailers for all our books. And they're great fun to watch because they've got music that he got and everything. And they're really fun.
And the book trailers are on our website as
Yeah.
well. So you can take a look at all the different trailers to see if you would be interested in exploring that further.
And that was embonpoint.com, but just so you all are aware, that is pronounced embonpoint, which is perhaps
plump in French.
Means plump. And it's got to be one of the most fabulous ways of describing a fat bitch, like embonpoint.
It rolls off your tongue like candy,
Embonpoint. Gorgeous. Now, I'm gonna go to Jean and Fuad for this, since you all have been so gracious with us for your time. Talking about potentially publishers who are doing the good work, can you all think of any references that you might know of behind the scenes? So, of course, we've got Embonpoint Publishing, but, maybe off the page, but behind the page, authors and artists. Can you think of anyone who's plus size and maybe bringing some excellence into comics that either of you all are aware of?
The first one that comes to mind would be Leah Williams, who does a number of things both for Marvel and DC. She did quite a lot of contributions to the most recent Age of X-Men, the Krakoan Age. As I mentioned, she's also responsible for Sexy Blob, so we all owe her a debt for that. There's a couple other creators who are not necessarily plus size themselves, but do a good job with representation. T.D. Williams, who is currently writing Catwoman and wrote the most recent run of Excalibur, does a great job with plus size characters.
I guess I don't have many references, but Chris Claremont wrote the romance for Blob and Psylocke, so that's an honorable mention for me. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Okay. Jean, I love that you picked Jean Grey as your name. And which era of Jean Grey? Because she's been so many there's been so many what about her made you pick that name?
Originally the original Phoenix Saga.
Okay.
Because like I said, I read that when I was very, very young and really imprinted on it. And the fact that she was someone who was willing to put herself out there to be the one who says, I'm the only one who can do this. If I have to die to save the people I love, then that's what happens. And that really resonated strong in me as a young person.
Okay.
And I kind of stuck with her the whole time. I mean, like most Marvel characters and most characters who are written by multiple writers, there's, they're not all great stories. Also, sometimes Jean's just a bitch. And I love that about her, though.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. And ironically, probably my second favorite comic character ever is Madeline Pryor. I'm so happy they did my Queen right in X-Men 97.
I just have one character that I will not forgive myself if I don't mention him. Kingpin. Kingpin.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like,
Kingpin.
we cannot finish this episode without talking about Kingpin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He's a very interesting character. And I was talking about this with the husband yesterday because he is a character that does not have superpowers, but he is massive. He is massive, and he has so many dimensions to him. He's not just defined by his size, and what I think is interesting about him is that he finds power in his size. He's seen as fat, but the lore about him is that he's just muscle. He's a bull. And what I do like when he fights characters like Spider-Man is that he gets a lot of fat jokes thrown his way, but they don't seem to phase him that much. And I do love that he finds power in his size. And it also shows you that our own heroes have some work to do with their fat phobia. And that's interesting to me because Peter Parker, we should emulate Peter Parker, we should like him, but hey, why are you treating him like that just because of his weight? What are you saying? How do you feel about other fat people? Because you're brandishing these jokes about bigger people like a weapon. So that's problematic, and it's not addressed.
It just occurred to me that I feel like there's a couple of times that Juggernaut, of all people, got referred to as Fat Boy, and it might have been by Rogue, but I was just thinking, like, of all people to call fat, Juggernaut, but then again, like, he is like just this massive mountain of a human, so.
Yeah, but we've also seen this from the dad bod trend. Like, skinny people don't know what fat looks like. Like
Exactly.
A twink donut one time, and they're like, oh my god, he's clinically obese and he's about to die of diabetes. And it's like, this is a 125-pound 19-year-old. Like, this isn't even dad bod, let alone fat. But, like, skinny people don't know what fat looks like. But I made a post about this not too long ago. Well, it was a story about people making fat memes about individuals, shall we say, that they don't agree with politically. And my point to that was, that's still not okay. Because, unfortunately, for anyone who does not realize this, fascism at its core is, I have the right to do anything I want to you and dehumanize you because you are not human. And the beginnings of that is, I'm going to take this trope of you and turn it into an insult and a plaything. And I understand that maybe we don't think it means much when you make a fat joke about someone who you don't like politically. But that is the same core root of the thing that leads to all the bad shit that happens, and we not emulate that. So, fat jokes at the expense of someone that you don't like, it's not good. If you don't agree and you think that what they're doing is bad, that alone is a significant base of thing to work on, to comment and say, this is not a good thing. And you should absolutely do that. You should absolutely speak truth to power about what they're doing and do that. The fat jokes is not it. Because also, they're not going to see the fat joke. But your fat friends will.
Agreed.
So stick to jokes about his orange makeup.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? As a ginger, I give you permission. I say you can make orange jokes about that man. Take that. God damn.
Approved.
Get stamped. Psh,
You
approved.
look like a real handsome man. You do not look like that.
Thank you.
That was not directed at you in any way.
No, it's fine. Mason, you were calling me gorgeous and beautiful and sexy. I take all of those compliments to heart. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But leaning a little bit more into the fun, because I think we've gone through some really good depth diving on the size of fatness. I want to put it to you all. Who are some of your favorite comic book characters? And Jean, I think your namesake is such an unknown variable, such an elusive chanteuse of a comic character. Maybe we'll go to them first. Who might be some of your favorite characters?
Yes, I no idea who my favorite could be. No idea whatsoever. Obviously Jean. Much in all of her incarnations, and as I was just saying to Mason when we had a little break there, I love Jean because she is, self-sacrificing and loving and will do whatever it takes to do the right thing. But she's also kind of a bitch. She's a little bit of a bully. She's not perfect. And I love that about her. I like most queer comic fans, most of my favorite characters are women. I love Emma Frost. I love Madeline Pryor. I love Dazzler. I love Storm. All of these strong women who, I grew up with, and learned in a lot of ways how to be a good person from. And one of the things that I always loved, particularly about Claremont X-Men, is that none of these characters are perfect. They make mistakes. They say the wrong thing. They do the wrong thing. But when they do, it's almost always in service of, I was trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And that's something that really appeals to me. So
I think I'm going to go with another telepath, Emma. I think I have to go with Emma because, okay, she is diva, she is mother, but she also has a very complicated story. She says many times, I thrive under pressure. Her whole mutation is turning into a diamond. It's very on the nose, but in the same time, she is a character that has been, forged through hardship, and she found strength in that hardship, in those struggles, and she made it her own. And also, she's so unapologetically her. It's like the titties are out, the legs are out, the outfits are out, and
she wears lingerie as a uniform.
Oh,
her uniform is just lingerie.
Love it. She's so sensual in everything that she does, and she carries that energy so well. And she also has this other dimension in which she does everything for the family. And the family to her is not a biological family, it's the family that she chose. And I think that's a story that many queer people just innately relate to, because she is mother. She will look out for you, and she's really great. I love her.
I can't say that it's a character, it's an artist. And I've bought his last two books. Barry Windsor Smith did Monster, which was phenomenal. And it was originally a Hulk story that Marvel turned down, and it's an incredible book. And then the other one is Ad Astra, which was supposed to be a Storm story, but Marvel turned it down. So he just created a book with the character Ad Astra. But when you read it, it's like, that's Storm. So he just changed the hair color and did some things, but they're both just the most incredible, like taking the Hulk in a direction he's never been, taking her in a direction she's never been, and really, really great work. So those have been the last two things that I've read that I've really, really enjoyed.
And I'm going to be a little more superficial and obvious. For me, the character of Diana Prince has always been true to my heart, growing up as a teenager, preteen even, actually. Just from that, and the character is not always as sweet and nice as maybe people who aren't familiar with it may think. The actual character is pretty deep, complex. She can be bitchy, and learning, as you do when we're forming who we are in our teen years, morals and virtues, and that character provided so much of that for the young me. I just appreciated that immensely, and I would always visualize, what would Diana do? And I know that sounds ridiculous and silly, but it really just helped me look at the world and approach it from a perspective of wanting to do the right thing and making things happen.
And knowing when it's time to spin.
Well, I had to whittle it down to an honorable mention and a favorite. So I'll start with the honorable mention. As much as I love Wonder Woman, I really identify more with her kid sister, Donna Troy. Donna is complicated. She's fucked up. She's had like one of the most fucked up origin stories in all of the DC universe. She currently is like the only person to hold all of the memories from all of the previous multiverses. So she's like the only one that remembers the current continuity, like from beginning of the like Crisis on Infinite Earths to where they are now. And I just like that she's not perfect. Like, I know that Diana's not perfect either, but Diana's so close to being perfect. Like, she's just basically this goddess among men, and it's like I can't really identify with her. Like, I can never identify with Superman because he's the big blue Boy Scout. Like, I identify more with Batman because he's fucked up and complicated and he's got psychosis and probably a few other things he hasn't dealt with. So like that feels human to me. And when I read Donna's, like, and Donna's been through a lot of trauma. So there was just something about that I found. And when she teams up with Jason Todd, like, I love their dynamic because he's such an asshole, and she's always trying to like get him to not be an asshole. And it never seems to. And it's, I think they even dated for a little while. I can't remember if I'm right about that. But and then the favorite, I actually am going to go with another psychic. I'm going to go with Psylocke, another character that has an incredibly complicated origin. She's basic. So that before they retconned her, Betsy Braddock ended up like, she was born a white woman, a white British woman, but she wound up in the body of a Japanese woman. So like British woman, British, her brain, her soul, everything got transferred into a Japanese woman. And that was the version that we had of her through the 90s. But I just loved it because she was a ninja, she was a psychic. She later on she battled with the Shadow King, and she developed certain powers from she obtained a substance called the Crimson Dawn. She gets this sweet ass tattoo over one eye, and like she can walk through shadows, and it resurrects her from the dead. And I was just like, I know it's nuts, but I really love Psylocke as a character, and she does most of it with a Cockney accent.
I was going to ask which Psylocke you're referring to, because technically that's a whole different person now. Have you read Betsy's more current comics where she's?
No, I haven't picked up on any of the new.
She is fantastic. The miniseries Betsy Braddock, Captain Britain, is so good. Also, she is now out and in a relationship with Rachel Summers, which I love.
Yes, I do love that.
So, as I've said, I am purely a TV cinematic person. I've not read the comics. However, courtesy of X-Men 97, I think my favorite superhero would be the person that I think, having now watched that show, I identify with the most, which is Rogue. Rogue, being introduced to her through X-Men 97, as a person who, she's got a mouth on her, hello, but also is willing to go there and punch you in the face. That is very much me. It's what happened to Gambit. And then she goes and she's trying to track down Bastion, and Captain America comes in like, I can't let you. And she picks up his shield, throws it away, and says, you better get the fuck out of my face before I rip your head off your shoulders. I am doing what I need to do for me. Do yourself the favor and get out of my way. And then she just proceeds to go and cause complete and utter destruction. Because, yes,
it's so interesting when I was watching that with you, because I kept thinking like, oh, he doesn't even know like the bulk of Rogue's trauma. Like Rogue has been traumatized since she was a young child, and she has just been used and abused and taken advantage of. And that was Rogue when she said, I'm fucking done. I'm just fucking done.
All y'all with your grandstanding, I'm not doing it. And then in that penultimate episode, when Charles Xavier was done getting his pussy blown open, comes back to Earth to try and sit there and act all good Samaritan, fucking crown on his shoulder, angel wings and halo, going, no, don't do it, Magneto. No, you know what you're doing. Shut the fuck up, Charles. And I'm like, yes.
Charles is always going to try and save his boyfriend.
Yes.
And you know what I will say about 97, I'm so glad that they didn't shy away from the homoerotic aspect of their relationship, because I know that it's not canon, but I'm like, these are bitter exes.
It's not canon, but it's not canon.
It certainly feels it, my god. But no, Rogue would have to be that one for me. What a powerhouse, what a character. Very much.
James, as an X-Men newbie, did you cry in episode 5?
Oh, I felt
we sobbed uncontrollably.
I felt a type of way. Listen, I did see someone do like their review of the show, and they summed it up in one sentence, which was, When the series was first announced, I was terrified that it wasn't going to live up to the original. When the series was airing, I was terrified that it was going to lose quality as time went on. And now that the series is over, I'm terrified that nothing will ever be as good as this ever again. And I gotta say, yeah.
When I coerced my poor boyfriend, who has never read a comic in his life, to watch the first 5 episodes of it, and I look over at the end of episode 5, and he's in tears, and I was like, "You don't even know these characters," and it had that effect. Like, that's how good this show is.
I will be clear about this. I saw the slaughter of so many well-known names, and I didn't care because I was like, I haven't seen.
Well, for me, I was like, "Oh my god, they killed," you know.
Word like Banshee or whoever the fuck, like Vaporize, and I'm like, whatever, don't care. Emma Frost Crush, and I kind of like knew about the Diamond Powers. I was like, well, I know she'll be okay. And then all these other people died. Magneto dying, I was a bit like, that's gonna be a fake out, and then it was. But it was Gambit that got me. The squelch and the fact that he used his death to like channel the energy back into the big thing and make it explode, and like Rogue just frozen there, unable to do anything. I
think the moment that got me the most, I mean, yes, of course, was that, but then it was like when he's trying to fend off the Wild Sentinel, and he's got that group of Morlocks clinging to his legs, and Leech looks up at him, and he's like, and he says in German, "Don't be afraid."
Don't be afraid.
Yeah. Like Morlocks, a perfect representation for like queerness that you cannot hide, and otherness where, you know, and I was saying this to Tim yesterday, I loved that so many of these Morlocks were characters who like, what are their powers? So many of these mutations are not like, ooh, I now have this power, I'm going to save the day. So many of these powers were like, I now just look like a freak. I now just look like something that is quintessentially non-human. And who I am as a person is the same. I am just Jim Bob from down the road who just wants to go to work, earn his paycheck, come home and be with his family. And now because of this mutation, I am visibly other. I cannot ever be a part of mainstream society again. I have no choice but to cling to the hope of a brighter and better future, and that it relies on those of us who have strength and power to protect those who don't have the power to intercede for themselves. Like, it's so potent, it's so raw, it's so real. I'm looking forward to season 2. But
oh yes, definitely.
As a way to bring this episode to a close, I want to ask of each of you, what do you want to see for the future of fat representation in comics?
I'll jump in and start. So I want to see adventure heroes. I want to see beyond the superhero, you know, a fat adventure hero who, you know, goes on these different experiences, and where the fat is not a barrier to them, you know, pursuing, you know, whatever adventure lays ahead. You know, I think there's room for that, and I just want to see writers push the boundaries and to be able to show empowered fat characters filled with agency and purpose, and not, you know, not a joke, not a trope, just, you know, to have that representation, I think would be amazing.
For me, if I can chime in, I would like to see more agency for these characters, because it's their size, is their obesity, is their belly, but it's just one dimension. I would like to see fat characters that have other dimensions that don't relate to their size. Like, yeah, they're an amazing hero. Yeah, they're an amazing detective, and they just happen to be fat. And parallel to that, I would like to see them being desirable, you know, being portrayed in a way that is desired by other people. And it's just something that I haven't seen right now. And it would be very refreshing to see. I would like to see also fat people portrayed and drawn different, you know, like there are so many different types of big bodies. I would like to see fat people with a big butt, or with a big belly, or with big arms, or a muscle chop combo that we don't really see in comics. I don't remember, maybe you guys can help me, but I don't remember seeing muscle chops in comics. And that is something that I would love to see, you know?
On rare occasions, Lobo gets drawn with a beer belly, but
very rarely, but
yeah.
It's not something that we see really.
For me, I just want to see more, and I want to see more diverse personality types. As we mentioned, you know, fatness is so often used as kind of a shorthand for someone who is corrupt, someone who is evil. You know, that's And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. It's the same problem that you run into with queer representation of comics. If there's only 30 fat characters between Marvel and DC, and 99% of them are evil, then that's a problem. We need more fat side characters. We need more fat heroes. We need characters for whom, they happen to be fat, but that's not the point of their power. I would like to see a fat character whose power doesn't relate to gravity, density, toughness. I love Harry Leland from the older Hellfire Club comics and X-Men. Great character, really fascinating. What's his power? Density control. Okay, give me, why can't a fat person be, a flyer? Why can't a fat person have, Bishop's energy manipulation powers, or be a telepath like Jean or Betsy or Emma? Fat people exist in such a wide variety of careers and functions and personality types in real life. Let's see it on the page.
I agree with Jean. I'm really kind of tired of these power set, but and I think Big Bertha is probably the biggest offender there for me. Is I don't want to see that again. I don't think that promotes anything good in anyone who reads that. So, and I'd like to see an end to, because now I flashed back to, this is kind of a specific reference, but I used to read the Legion of Superheroes comics, which is set in the 30th century. It's in the DC universe. That's where Bouncing Boy comes from. He's part of that Legion. Okay. But there was an enemy called the Emerald Empress that I really liked, and she starts off as a overweight girl who's attempting to join the Legion of Superheroes, but they reject her, they make fun of her, yada yada. Then the Emerald Eye of Ekron finds her, which is kind of like a sort of ancient version of the Guardian's power ring, right? It's sentient, it's parasitic, it takes over its host. And so it finds her and it transforms her into the Emerald Empress. And the first thing that you see on the panel, the first thing that comes out of her mouth is, "Oh my God, I'm beautiful." I don't want to see shit like that again. I just that I'm hoping that we see less of that. Granted, like I said, I haven't really had an opportunity to read anything very current in the comic world. But when I do pick it up again, I don't want to see tropes like that anymore.
Listen, to close out, I think this has been a really incredible episode, and I just want to echo the sentiments here. I think, we've seen that there is the opportunity for greatness. I want to read these comics featuring Zephyr from Valiant. I want to see what this big girl does when she flies, and I want to see her in her power, and I want to see in the future fatties being fierce and fantastic. I want to see all of that. And speaking of fatties being fantastic and awesome, we have an incredible cast of individuals here, and I want to say a big thank you to each and every one of you for giving up your time today for a very long, but I think very good and in-depth episode. Thank you, everyone. Where can our listeners find each of you online?
So you can find me at embalmpointpublishing.com. You can find me on Instagram at Philip Berrigan Writer.
And I'm same places as him, but also I'm on Instagram, Mason Illustrator.
Oh, you guys can find me at Instagram at fuadito, like my name, but with an ito at the end. It's for Little Fuad.
You can find me on Grommr as uncannyphoenix, or on BlueSky at mxjeangrey, just my name with the mix honorific.
Wonderful. Well, that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. Now listen, if you liked this episode, the podcast, our guests, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram at ThiccMouse and Grommr at Orpheus. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to become a financial supporter of the show, you can donate to our PayPal, and you can always write to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye,
Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Spotify podcast.
Artwork, media design, editing, and production by James Heinzen.
With original theme music by CYMK.